I get a lot of questions these days, as you can imagine, about what's going on with the economy. How does that impact our built for rent deal? And, it's not a no-brainer. I've been saying that for a couple of years now. There are risks with build for rent, and the primary ones are ones that I jotted down here. Everyone's going to have their own list, but I put recession near the top. But I tell you, the one that I get the most questions about are rent levels and growth. What are the rents going to be on my project? And in every study that we do, we look at 4 local indicators to predict rents. I call it our 4-spoke methodology. I'll explain a little bit more of that in a minute. Depth of the market, excess competition, that with the headlines about how much money is going into this space, there's worry that there's too much supply being brought to the market, but there absolutely is not, and we'll get into that as well. Again, the rent levels and rent escalation rates are key questions. It really boils down to what are the rents going to be when my project opens? And then the corollary to that is how deep is the demand for build for rent? So again, we think about it as, according to these 4 indicators at a local level, SFR rents, which you have to adjust. You can't just use them right out of the box. You got to adjust for location, size of lot, condition of the home, age of the home, and then build for rent comps, if there are any. I'd say in half the studies we do, or at least half, there are no build for rent comps in the area. So you have to rely on the other spokes here. Multifamily, especially if you're doing horizontal multifamily or townhomes, very important to understand the competitive environment for the apartments. But even for full-size single-family development, you want to know what the rent trends are and what the occupancy rate trends are. And then the 4th spoke is for sale homes. What would I have to pay on a monthly ownership basis to own a home in that area? So we always look at that as well, and I recommend that everybody do some combination of these analytics when you're trying to analyze what the rents can be as of today. And then we also overlay some survey work on top of that. But talking about the rents some more, some people that are out there saying that rent growth is about to go negative. My analysis says no. Build for rent renters are advancing in their careers. Most of them being millennials, they are seeing income growth of 7 to 11% a year, many of them up 15% on an annual basis. They're at that age where they're starting to move up in quantum leaps in their career. In 19 of the last 20 built to rent studies we completed, we arrived at escalation projections of above 5% for the next 2 years, some 6 to 6.5%, lower than that in California, of course. Renters' earnings are rising fast, like we just talked about. You have constrained supply and pent-up demand. We're nowhere near at a national aggregate level overbuilding yet. We still have to watch that at a local level going forward. But this 5 to 6% rate of escalation is still a dramatic slowdown versus the 15% escalations we were seeing in the last year or so. And I'll just add too that of 7 million leases and those renters, 23%, that's well below the 30 to 33% ceiling on affordability that people typically like to refer to. There is a risk, though, that on the subject of the for sale homes, that prices will fall in certain submarkets. Fall is probably an exaggeration. I think it's going to be a modest pullback in most areas, but that will affect the built for rent calculation and comparison. So we have to take that into account. And I will say too that builders are, if people perceive and expect that builders are lowering their prices, they'll want to rent even more. They'll want to rent until the home prices stabilize and maybe stay renters for a little while longer, hoping to get a better deal down the road. And then they might decide to stay renters just for the convenience factor, but that's a case-by-case scenario. Now, I want to also drive home a point that the build for rent market is bigger as a market than you're being told in most of the media. I'm seeing so many articles that really get it wrong. They cite this number from the Census Bureau from the quarterly starts and completions by purpose and design, and that shows around 51,000 starts for the purpose of rental of single family homes over the last year in the course of 2021. This is a way to correct the misperception, because as shown here in a screenshot from NAHB, they clarify, and this is really important, that the estimate of 51,000 excludes or only includes homes built and held by the builder for rental purposes. Look at that last paragraph. I'll read that second sentence. It's important. The estimates exclude homes that are sold to another party for rental purposes, which is a big part of the market. So you got the 51,000. Add to that 3 or 4% of single family starts. That's Bob Dietz's number from NAHB. He's the chief economist there. So that results in another 30 to 40,000 per year. So added together, you got 85 to 95,000 starts for build for rent in year 2021. And they're all getting absorbed as fast as they can be delivered so far. And John Burns tweeted that 10% of all the lots purchased in the last 12 months were for built for rent. And that lines up with that 85 to 95,000, which is about 8% of starts, 8% of single family starts last year. There's room for that to go up higher. And I think that that's the track that we're on. There's plenty of demand to absorb this supply. And you can see that on this page that shows the demographics of family formation and the millennials. You see that bulge that I pointed out with the blue arrow on the left. That's the peak of the millennial population. And you can see the age they're at now, and the peak we've still got another 5 years to go until that peak lines up with the peak of family formation age, because people are starting to form families at age, in their 30s instead of in their 20s nowadays. So I think that really supports that even though population growth as a whole is slowing down, there's a lot of growth of demand in this segment. And that lines up with my forecast where I'm saying it's 95,000 last year. This year, 110 to 120, 110 if we have a recession, 120 if we don't, and then it goes up from there. With that being said, I don't want to take up any more time. I'll stop and thank you.